Hello guys, welcome back to this channel, and today I'm making my Batman Returns movie review. This one is a first time watch for me, and I actually quite enjoyed it. And I might have seen this one before, I don't think so. I had seen, I had seen Batman Forever, of course. Well, not of course. And I have seen the original one, before this watch, and then I haven't seen this one for some reason. And, well, you're going to hear my thoughts here. Not much to say, but go check my Batman playlist. Go check my Scream playlist. So, let's get started, because my last intros have been quite long. Next up, you have the good, and I think what I really liked about this one, I think this one is much better paced than the first one, and because like in the first one, I think literally the Batman barely shows up in the first half. Same with this one, but this one you have a bunch of different you have three different villains. And they're pretty much all getting developed in the first half, where you just have in the first one. I do love the Joker, but you feel like it's literally his movie for the entire first half until Batman kind of steals it. Good or bad to me, but still. And then in this one, you have the Penguin, who's, I do feel like you do feel a little bit of a lack of Batman, but not as much as in the first one. I do think this one sort of is the opposite problem of the first one. I feel like the problem with this one, I think the first half of it is actually pretty good. And then once you get to the second half, once Batman really shows up, I don't think it's bad necessarily, but it gets much weird. It gets much weirder. I think this is definitely a weirder movie than the first one, because this one's so much more Tim Burton. Like, the Penguin feels like a very Tim Burton-ized version of the Penguin. Catwoman is not quite as distinct, but still. And overall, I just find this notes to be a bit weird. I do think some of the action is okay in this one. I like the opening scene much more in this one than I did in the first one, because it actually leads into something. And I think just like the first one, Michael Keaton's pretty good. I like it actually a little bit more in this one for some reason. And also you have the Batmobile, which is I don't think it's my favorite Batmobile, but I quite like it compared to the one in Batman Forever. God, I hate that middle fin thing. It's designed to me like a thing that's sold for toys. I don't know where I was going with that, but yeah. And overall, all the villains are all pretty good. Catwoman, I thought was a great villain. How she is kind of tormented by Max Schreck, who kills her and then gets brought back to life by cats, and now seeking vengeance. This is my favorite version of Catwoman. Now, I wouldn't say easily. I do quite like Zoe Kravitz in her from the new Batman. I don't like her quite as much because she doesn't really have any the villainous presence compared to this one. I wouldn't really even call her a villain. She's mostly a hero throughout it. Michelle Pfeiffer, I think, is legitimately a villain, and I think she's a lot of fun. She feels like the most Catwoman-y of Catwoman. That's not a sentence. Even though I don't think she's as comic book accurate as Anne Hathaway, for example, I think she just does a great job in the role. She's a lot of fun, and I think overall, I think her character is pretty great. Even when she is Selena Kyle, I still think she's a good character, and the way this sort of leads into the rest of the movie is pretty good. And then you have Max Schreck, which I actually kind of like him because it's Christopher Walken. I think any other actor play this character kind of dull. But I think Christopher Walken does a great job, and that's why I just really that's why I like this character. I don't think he's a great villain or anything, but I think Christopher Walken is just what makes this character so much better. And I think that's why he's a lot of fun. And then you have Danny DeVito as the Penguin. He's sort of I don't think he's actually the wrong guy to play the Penguin, because I think Tim Burton, actually casted his movie so much better than Joel Schumacher did. Literally, Tommy Lee Jones is not the guy that you would cast to play this version of Two-Face. I think he'd actually do a pretty good version of Two-Face, but a more serious version, not the campy version in Joel Schumacher's. Now, I wouldn't call it a live action cartoon. I would call Batman and Robin a live action cartoon. Yes, I watched it, but still, I find this version of the Penguin to be very odd, very Tim Burton like, where he actually turns him into a Penguin man. I do like his little arc involving wanting to be able to fit into Gotham, but I think he's just a bit too over the top, and they go a bit too far with the Penguin, especially when you get to the end. And yeah, it's just a very odd note. Still, I quite like the Penguin, or I quite like Danny DeVito as the Penguin, but I don't think he's like that good of a villain. I think he's a decent enough character, but I wouldn't take any of these villains over the Joker, that's for sure. They're mixed up. Just like the first one, it's not very Batman centric until you get to the end of it. So, like, I think you have some good villains, as I said. I do really like Catwoman. I do pretty much like the Penguin. I do like Max Schreck mostly because of Christopher Walken. I think he's a great actor. So, but then you have Batman, where I think he's a little bit more of a character arc in this one than he does in the original one. But still, it's not quite there. Batman didn't start having character arcs until Batman Begins. Oh my god. What was the comic book genre back then? Oh, the only thing good of that was the first two Superman movies. That's sad. Anyway, enough about that. I do think Tim Burton, I'm not, as I said, not a very big fan of his movies, so I'll just end it there. He very Tim Burtonizes the Penguin, and to pretty much his detriment, because it makes him look very weird. Like, I think if he did the Penguin Man a little bit, like, it made him, like, if you took away, like, I think this would have worked better if he was more of a gangster type villain, just like he was in the Batman, but more of a campy type gangster, which I think actually could have worked a bit better. But then again, I think that would have been too much like Jack Nicholson's Joker. So I don't know if that would have worked. The bad, and the thing I just don't like, unlike the first one, I don't think the plot is very all over the place. I think this one's storytelling is much more focused, but I think the issue is that he goes way too far at the Penguin. And, like, literally, like, there's this scene where I think he was gonna, like, murder the children or something. I think the darkness, it works for the most part, but other times it just get a bit too far. This one's a much darker movie than Batman, for sure. And I still think this one's actually quite fun to watch. Like it's a weird but fun movie. And I think it's very much a Tim Burton movie. Don't know if I care so much, but it doesn't really add anything to it. And I do think he's good with the villains. I think he's been good with the villains for both of his Batman movies. Batman more so than Batman Returns, but I do think the villains are actually pretty good, but they do take up a lot of screen time to develop, and Batman really doesn't go into action until halfway through the movie. Granted, that's the same for Batman. But I think once he's, like, at least in the original Batman, once he's in action, I do think the movie gets quite good. And I think the movie gets worse as Batman goes into action, because none of the action with the Penguin's all that good. I think it's all really weird. And also you have the stuff with Catwoman, which they didn't do enough to develop her at the end, and they didn't do anything to really close off her character, so they just left it on a cliffhanger, sort of. And then there's not very much that happens as you get in the end of the movie. It's just failed attempts to get the Penguin. You have him getting supposedly framed, and then stuff happens. So very odd way as you get to the end, near the end of the movie, and I'm like, really, this is what you're going for here? And especially Max Schreck's death was very odd. The revenge moment was satisfying, but his death was a bit much. Granted, Joker had some more over-the-top deaths in the first one. What should I say? Anyway, even though I've been kind of crapping on it, I actually do find this one quite entertaining.